before going into Model United Nations, we should first understand the importance and the significance of the United Nations organization. Now, the United Nations organization is actually an intergovernmental non-profit organization that actually, when it started in 1945, the main aim of the United Nations organization was world peace, but and world peace only. They just wanted right after the Second World War ended. Countries like the United States, Soviet Union, United Kingdom, and mostly the winners of the Second World War wanted to prevent another world war from happening in the coming decades, so that their resolution was to make an organization consisting of countries. Their aim was just several countries, powerful countries, to come together and have a consensus and have diplomatic relations rather than having wars and military actions. Now, United Nations organization first commenced in the 24th of October 1945, officially commenced. But before that, in July 1945, right after the World War II ended, 50 countries met at San Francisco at the United Nations Conference on International Organization and drew up something called the United Nations Charter. Now, this is actually the primary documentation that governs the United Nations organization. Still, it is the one that is governing the United Nations. It's called the United Nations Charter. Now, why do we need to know about the United Nations? Frankly, we all need to know about the United Nations before we go into Model United Nations, because United Nations Charter is actually the primary handbook that every delegate should have when one is going to a debate in any committee, right? So now that's why I'm stressing the importance of the United Nations organization and especially the United Nations Charter. Currently, the United Nations consists of 193 member states with headquarters based in New York City and further offices at Geneva, Nairobi, and Vienna. Now, the organization is, as I told you before, it's a non-profit organization, but it's financed from assessed and voluntary contributions from its member states, especially those big states like China, France, United Kingdom, United States, and Russia. Okay, so let's move on to the concept of the MUN. So you all know that what MUN stands for. MUN stands for Model United Nations. Now, Model United Nations can be considered as an academic simulation of the United Nations, of a United Nations conference. What is an academic simulation? It's just that we students or participants or contestants compete by role-playing delegations of countries. That's what primarily in MUN does. So you are assigned a country, you have a team. It's actually a competition right now. It's just the same as a competition. So you have school, or if you're representing a school, you have school teams. If you are representing university, we have universities teams. So when the teams are assigned countries and the team members are assigned to committees, so they then compete against each other. But primarily, the MUN stands for MUN. The true essence of the MUN is actually the role playing of delegations of countries, and role playing, not only just role playing, it also aims on discussing world issues while keeping in line with respective foreign policies. Now, if we are assigned a country, we should always be aware of the foreign policy of that country. We just can't go and say whatever we want. We first need to do a research, and then we need to give our facts based on our foreign policy, not just what we think is right. Okay, I think for now, if you have any questions or any clarifications that needs to be made, could you please ask any clarifications that you need? Should I then continue? I think you understood the first part. Okay. Then in a typical MUN, it's not just one committee or not just one conference there. There are several committees in a MUN. Usually it depends, the number of committees depends on the scale of the MUN that we participate. Usually,
sorry to interrupt. Yeah. Guys, I think this is something very important for us because whenever we, let's say, attend a conference such as NYMUN or SLMUN, I think Amod, these are the committees that we have, right? So we would be located to either of these, right? අපි මේන් එකකට තමයි වැටෙන්නේ. එතකොට අපි මේක ගැන පොඩ්ඩක් අද අමුද්ද එක්ස්ප්ලেইন කරන්න මේක නේද? ඔතන පොඩ්ඩක් අපි ඔය වගේ කමිටි එකකට තමයි allocate වෙන්නේ. එතකොට අමුද්ද එක පොඩ්ඩක් එක්ස්ප්ලেইන් කරන්න.
Now let's go one by one then. For the first, the General Assembly. Make a General Assembly එක කියන්නේ ප්‍රධාන the main assembly, the main conference or the committee of any MUN. So make a MUN එකකම General Assembly එකක් තියෙනවා. Every MUN has a General Assembly. The General Assembly usually addresses on immediate threats, right? So if there is a constant war situation, conflict situation, or a common threat. Now, for example, right now there might be COVID-19 crisis might be the topic of the General Assembly this time around. So like that. So immediate threats are discussed in the General Assembly. So the first one is GA. So GA1 normally GA1, then General Assembly 1. Normally in a normal United Nations conference, I mean not a MUN, near United Nations, there are about 6 General Assemblies, but in MUNs usually at most there will be at least there is one for sure, but sometimes there may be 2 General Assemblies. That depends on the scale of the MUN again, right? එතකොට මේ තියෙන ලිස්ට් එක හැම එකම ඉන්නේ නැහැ. තියෙන අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම තියෙන එකක් තමයි General Assembly. ඊළඟට යටින්ම in the bottom you see මම ඉස්සෙල්ලම කියන අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම තියෙනවා. In the bottom there is UNSC or United Nations Security Council. Then the Security Council, I'll just explain what Security Council is. Security Council only consists of 11 members. Those are the veto powers. I just can't remember all the countries which have veto powers. China, United States, obviously, France, Germany, India, like that. Those countries are the countries with veto powers. Those countries are the only members of the United Nations Security Council. Now, a country, for example, like Sri Lanka can never be a part of the United Nations Security Council. That's only accessible to those countries. So in an MUN also, there are only 11 delegates in the UNSC committee. Right?
ගොඩක් අපි powerful කියලා හිතන රටවල් වෙන තියෙනවා.
එතකොට powerful රටවල් ටික තමයි එතන තියෙන්නේ. එතකොට United States, France, Germany, UK ඔය ටික countries ටික තමයි එතන තියෙන්නේ.
Japan. Sorry to interrupt. It's basically 5 permanent members in the committee and 10 members who keep on changing. Right? Yeah, only 5 veto people 5. Yeah. There would be China, France, Russian Federation, the United Kingdom, and the US.
US, yes.
So these are the 5 countries who hold the veto power, and the rest of the countries, they keep on changing for each UN.
Yeah. According to the topic, right? According to the
yes, according to the topics.
They might also include some kind of like Syrian rebels that Syrian rebels that representative
Yes.
yeah. Okay. So, I'm not actually a very good expert on the United Security Council. I usually do GA, UNEP, and all that. Now, let's move on to the second one, UNEP, right? UNEP, usually the UNEP is United Nations Environment Protection. In school level MUNs, UNEP is sure shot. There is UNEP surely, because kids like to speak about the environment, and it's very easy to actually speak about environment.
What do you name?
So yeah. So Janga, should I continue?
Yeah,
Is
of
it
course,
fine?
of course.
Yeah. Okay. The United Nations Environmental Protection. Now, in the General Assembly, there will be about 100 delegates. So, 100 itara 50 100 ඉන්න පුළුවන් අපේ ස්කෝලල කමිටිය වල 100ක් විතර ඉන්නවා මේ ජෙනරල් ඇසෙම්බලි එකට. ඒ කියන්නේ ජෙනරල් ඇසෙම්බලි ගොඩක් ලොකුයි. like 500 විතර delegates ලා ඉන්නවා නම් 100ක් විතර GA එකේ ඉන්නවා. එතකොට UNEP එකෙත් 100ක් විතර ඉන්න පුළුවන් වෙලාවල් තියෙනවා. එතකොට UNEP is also something that most people like to talk about, and most countries will have the access to that the United Nations Environment Protection. And then the third one, this council is one of the most recent councils, ironically, United Nations Human Rights Council. This was founded in, I think, 2006. However, the United Nations Human Rights Council addresses on human rights violations throughout the world. I think we Sri Lankans have some kind of experience on the Human Rights Council with the war problems that we had. However, the United Nations Human Rights Council is, I think most MUNs have a Human Rights Council. They will talk about a specific human rights violation or a human rights issue in the immediate past. So that's the UNHRC. UNHRC may contain about 25 to 30 or 50, sometimes 50 delegates in the program.
That's what's in Geneva, right? Geneva.
Yeah, that's in Geneva. Yeah, Geneva. Yeah, UN in Geneva. Next one is ECOSOC. This is also like very not very common in MUNs, but some MUNs have this. ECOSOC is Economic and Social Council. This is one of the primary councils in the United Nations, one of the oldest ones. I think Economic and Social Council mostly focuses on economic troubles and social problems in countries. This may include trade problems and trade agreements and all that here. But this one is not that much attractive to delegates because it's kind of a little bit technical, because we need to have a little bit of economic knowledge to approach this council. But this one, if we do it right, we may have the ability to actually get a very easy best delegate nomination out of this Economic and Social Council if we approach it correctly. And then we have one of the oldest councils. I think this scope was founded in 1958 or something, 1950s, late 1950s. This one focuses on this says, you can see United Nations Committee on Peaceful Uses of Outer Space. Now outer space war එක තියෙන කාලේ තමයි මේක හැදුනේ, cold war එක කාලේ. This usually now at this level, this usually talks about the private sector, now SpaceX and those things, how they are enacted and how international problems regarding these things ළඟදී ඒවයි ගොඩක් කරලා කතා වෙන්නේ. ස්කෝපස් එකේ ඒවා තමයි මොකද NASA එක දැන් ගොඩක් කලාට ඒ කියන්නේ දැන් cold war එකක් නැති නිසා but usually some MUNs have a co-host committee and this is very interesting. This has a scientific element to it, so like you can have a little, if you have a good scientific knowledge on outer space and astronomy and those things, then this might be a tough. It's kind of very, it's also one of the most interesting ones out of the committees of an MUN. Then we have the CSTD, the Commission of Science and Technology for Development. This one this is also a little bit recent, 1997. This was founded on 1997. This committee focuses on science and technology problems, especially nowadays. This focuses on cryptography, cryptographic challenges, privacy problems, those things, privacy disputes, especially between the United Nations and the countries of the European Union. There may be there are very big privacy concerns out there. So then these problems and problems regarding especially the internet and Internet of Things and all that will be talked upon in here. So this also has some kind of a technological element to it, and those who are interested actually in technology can be there and really do something. Actually, for the first, some delegates I have seen school delegates just come to the first time, their first time MUN, and they take a higher commendation or something, because this is purely technical. So these are some examples. There may be other committees, but these are the most common committees that we see in a typical MUN. Usually, in a very balanced MUN, there may be a General Assembly. There is a General Assembly, a UNEP, UNHRC, and UNSC. ඔය හතර අනිවාර්යෙන් ඔය හතර තිබුණොත් හොඳ MUN එකක්. ඒ කියන්නේ සාමාන්‍ය MUN එක ඔය හතර නම් අනිවාර්යෙන්ම තියෙනවා. General Assembly, එතකොට 1 2 3 අන්තිම එක. ඔය ටික තියෙන්න පුළුවන් MUN එකේ. එතකොට අපිට වැඩිපුර අපි ටාගට් කරන්න ඕනේ ඒවා. මොකද දැන් UNHRC එහෙම ගොඩාක්ම හොඳ ඩිබේට් ස්ටේජ් එකක් තියෙනවා. හොඳට ගොඩක් දේවල් කතා කරන්න පුළුවන් HRC එකේ. ඒක කොහොම මේක සාමාන්‍යයෙන් ටිකක් හොඳ එකක්. සහ General Assembly, usually General Assembly focuses on, now I did an MUN with the topic was cyber warfare in the General Assembly. So like that, it can be any topic. Actually General Assembly එක අවුලක් නෑ. මොකක් හරි current affair එකක් තමයි discuss වෙන්නේ. Right, so I think you are all clear about the committees of a typical MUN. Right, so before actually I'll leave this slide. Before that, I need to talk about why MUNs are important. Right, so MUNs actually is not a debate competition, but I should say it's not a speech competition either. If you have a better speaking ability, good for you. That's really a good thing. But if your facts are wrong, if you are not bringing up good facts and figures, that's useless in an MUN. MUNs basically focus on diplomatic approaches, good foreign policy. I mean, good. If you are violating your foreign policy, I will give some examples in the next slides or something. I'll give some examples for foreign policy violations. So foreign policy violations are strictly watched over. When you are in every speech of yours, you will be assessed for foreign policy violations. So like that. So what the importance of this is, actually we learn how to communicate, and the best thing that we learn out of an MUN is negotiation skills. Now negotiation and also compromise. Now world peace goes on. We have a peaceful world because of compromises made by nations. Now, United Nations always goes on there. It has come all along this way because of compromises made by countries. If the United States did whatever they wanted, then we'll have had about 7 world wars right now. So they have made compromises. If China wanted to do whatever they want, they can't do that. They have made compromises. They have made compromises, and compromises is what has brought the world brought a war-free world right now. So what we learn from this is actually negotiation, compromise, and also thinking on our feet, because this is, by the way, this is not, I told you that this might be feel like a debate, and it is. Sometimes we need to be very we use our discretion and think on our feet to use diplomacy to achieve our nation's agenda, the assigned nation's agenda. So that's that. And also for countries like Sri Lanka, we are still having some problems with reconciliation. So Sri Lanka, so if we continue doing MUNs, what we improve is our reconciliation skills, because we have some problems, racial, socio-economic problems. So we may learn ways to address those problems by participating into MUNs. And these things are really important. I believe that these things are really important in when we are doing jobs or in the world of work. So that's also very important. And also all through this journey, if we take a good if we have a good journey in MUNs, we will improve our language skills a lot. I've seen this personally. දැන් ගොඩක් අපේ ස්කෝලවල ස්කූල්ස් වල ඩෙලිගේට් ට්‍රේනින් කරපු නිසා අපේ ස්කූල්ස් වල ගොඩක් මේ MUNs වලට එන්නේ සිංහල මීඩියම් ළමයි. ඉංග්‍රීසි මීඩියම් ළමයි වැඩිපුර ඔක්කොම වගේ එනවා. ඉංග්‍රීසි මීඩියම් ක්ලාසස් දෙකක් වගේ තියෙනවා. සිංහල මීඩියම් ළමයි තමයි එන්නේ. රෙගුලර්ගේ මුලින්ම එනකොට ලැන්ග්වේජ් ලොකු ඇබිලිටි එකකුත් නැහැ. But when they actually after 2 or 3 years on doing MUNs, they gain a good language knowledge. And ඒකෙම MUNs වලින් විතරක් language එක ගොඩ දාගන්න අය ගොඩක් ඉන්නවා. අන්තිම වෙද්දි බොහොම ඉහළටම language එක අරන් යන අය ඉන්නවා. excel කරන අය ඉන්නවා.
අපි හැමෝටම relate කරන්න පුළුවන් තරම් නේද?
ඔව් ඒක මම පුද්ගලිකවම දැකලා තියෙන දෙයක්. ඒක හරිම හිතා ගන්න බෑ. ඒ කියන්නේ දැන් මේක දැන් ගොඩක් අය හිතට යනවනේ මේක. ඒ කියන්නේ MUNs කියන්නේ මේ normal debate එකක් වගේ නෙමෙයි. ඇත්ත issues ගැන කතා කරන්න ගොඩක් වෙලාවට. එතකොට අර world politics ගැන ලොකු interest එකක් එනවා. එතකොට මේවා ගැන තවත් research කරන්න ගන්නවා, news international news බලනවා. එහෙම එතකොට අර English knowledge ඉබේම දියුණු වෙනවා. අනිත් එක අපි when we gain a new perspective of the world, actually I personally have experienced that myself. I mean, after I started doing MUNs, I have gained some, a new perspective of things happening all around the world about politics and all that. So that's very important. So let's go to the structure of an MUN. Okay. An MUN consists of 2 main parts, the secretariat and the committees. The secretariat and the committees are all interconnected. So the secretariat is actually headed by the Secretary General. Secretary General is the main, like the president of the MUN. He's the one that makes decisions about all the committees and everything about them, even logistical things. So Secretary General is the one that organizes the MUN, and then we have deputies. I'll first talk about the Secretariat's office. Secretariat may have a Deputy Secretary General if the MUN is large enough. Now, if it is a small conference, we may not need the Deputy Secretary General, because the Secretary General can handle all the things on his own, but there may the deputy secretary general is actually optional. And then the under secretary generals are considered as the staff of the secretariat's office. I mean the secretary general. That is the secretariat's office. And then we have the committees. So there may be 5 committees, 6 committees, or 4 committees. So the committees as a committee chairperson. Ideally, a committee should have only 1 chairperson and the rest should be vice chairs. But in some MUNs, there may be multiple chairpersons and also vice chairs. Now, committee chairpersons will communicate only directly to the Secretary General. If any problem arises in a committee, within a committee, they will always consult the Secretary General and no other person. That is how MUNs operate. And vice chairs actually don't contact with the Secretariat's office, only the chairpersons. So, and then there may be other staff in a committee. Press committee is actually a committee that focuses on press and reports and all that. That is optional. Some committees have a press corps, some conferences have a press corps. We call it the press corps. And the Secretary General is called the SG, DSG, USG. Chairperson and chair vice chair. Press committee, press corps, there may be a press corps or there may not be a press corps. It's just optional. And then there may be a rapporteur or admin. An admin කෙනෙක් තමයි ගොඩක් වෙලාවට ඉන්නේ. ඇඩ්මින්ලා කරන්නේ ගොඩක් වෙලාවට ඩෙලිගේට්ස් ලාට උදව් වෙන එක. ඉතින් එක එක දේවල් රෙගුලන්ට මේ උදව් වෙනවා කියන්නේ මේ වාඩි වෙන්න හරියට තැනක් මේ කරන එක අසයින් කරන එක. ඊළඟට ඒක ගොඩක් අර රෙස්පෙක්ටබල් ජොබ් එකක් විදිහට තමයි සලකන්නේ. ඇත්තටම කමිටි එකක third in demand ඉන්නේ. ඒකට chairperson, vice chair, ඊට පස්සේ admin, ඊට පස්සේ තමයි delegates. admin get approval තියෙන්න ඕනේ සමහර දේවල් වලට. එතකොට එහෙම Then we'll have to specially talk about the under secretary generals. Now, under secretary generals, there are ideally 6 under secretary generals in the United Nations organization. Under secretary general Antonio Guterres, right? But in a MUN, there are usually only 4 under secretary generals. Now, these, as I told you before, under secretary generals are considered as the staff of the SG and the DSG. So the first under secretary general is the under secretary general for political affairs. These are this one, the USG for political affairs focuses on mainly on the Security Council activities. He will be there physically at the Security Council all the time, be observing it from afar. He will not sit at the chair's table, but he will be observing it constantly. And then the next one is the Under Secretary General for Economic and Social Affairs. This one is very important if we have an ECOSOC or a GA6. Now the GA6 can General Assemblies 1 and දෙකක් තියෙන පුළුවන්. ECOSOC එකක් නැත්තම් GA6 එකක් තියෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඒතකොට GA6 එක හෝ ECOSOC එක ගැන බලන්නේ ඒක ස්පෙෂලි ඕනනේ යාට ටිකක් පොඩි ඉකොනොමික් නොලෙජ් එකක් තියෙන්න ඕනේ. ඒතකොට ඉකොනොමික් නොලෙජ් එකේ මේ පැත්ත පොඩ්ඩක් බලන්නේ under USG for Economic and Social Affairs. Then kind of the most important Under Secretary General, the Under Secretary General for Assembly Affairs and General Assembly Affairs and Conference Management. Now, this is the most kind of the most important under the hood person of a conference, because he is the one who handles all the logistical tasks of the conference, like from dinner to like room, signature of delegates, registration, housing for delegates, make sure the copies of drafts, resolutions are disseminated to delegates during committees presiding that. So everything about logistics is handled by the Under Secretary General for General Assembly Affairs and Conference Management. So this is the most important actually. Then the next one typically is the Secretary General for Communications and Public Information. Now, if there is a Presco එකක් තිබුණොත් මෙයා ඕන් නැහැ. Presco එකක් තිබුණොත් Presco එකේ chair කෙනෙක් ඉන්නවා. එයා තමයි මේක කරන්නේ. Presco එකක් නැත්තම් ගොඩක් ඒවල Presco එකක් නැහැ. එහෙම වුණොත් Under Secretary General for Communications and Public Information at a team එකක් ඉන්නවා. ඒ team එක තමයි they will be handling and liaising the media to cover the conference and conduct interview, issue press releases and all that. So that is the those are the list of Under Secretaries and their information. Okay, so let's move on. Actually, we only have 7 minutes more on this session. Let's go to the components of an MUN session. So in an MUN session, there are 4 main components. The first one is actually the speakers list. Now, on the right, you will see the, on the left, you will see the component, and the right, you will see the things that are expected by a delegate. So, in the speakers list speech, a delegate is only given usually 1 minute and 30 seconds. So, HRI speech, this is strictly a pre-prepared speech. You can't just impromptu make speech check කරන්න බෑ. මේක කලින් හොඳට rehearse කරලා ගිහිල්ලා කරන speech එකක්. So this speech mostly covers on country policy, problems and solutions. So මම දැම්ම කියන්නම් මෙහෙමයි නෑ මම ඒක විස්තරේ පස්සේ කියන්නම්. එතකොට මේකේ points of information තියෙනවා. එහෙම මම ඒක පස්සේ කියන්නම් විස්තරේ. ඊළඟට moderated මේව වෙන වෙනම අපි කතා කරනවා. Moderated caucus කියලා එකක් තියෙනවා. ඒතර speakers list එක ඉවර කරනවා. ඉතින් ඒක මෙහෙමයි දැන් delegates 100ක් හිටියොත් delegates 100ටම නම් දෙන්නේ නැහැ speakers speech එක. ඒක ඉතින් delegate ගේ තියෙන persuasion එක අනුව තමයි. ඉතින් placard එක උස්සලා ටිකක් කෑ ගහලා එහෙම active ඉන්න delegates ලට අපි chair එක ටක් ගාලා ඒගොල්ලන්ට speakers list එක නිකන් list එකක් විදිහට තියෙන්නේ. එතකොට A වලින් පටන් ගෙන C වලින් ඉවර වෙනකන් list එකට තමයි normally we just allocate those speeches, but එහෙම ඉතින් කරන්න බෑ සමහර ලොකු මේ committees වල මේ security council එක නම් පුළුවන්. Security council නැත්නම් පොඩි 30ක් 40ක් ඉන්න පොඩි එක පුළුවන්. ලොකු ඒ කියන්නේ general assembly මට වැඩිපුරම මේ experience in general assemblies වල ඒවයි එහෙම අපි දෙන්නේ නැහැ මේ ගොඩක් වෙලාවට හැමෝටම දෙන්නේ නැහැ ලැබෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒක ඉතින් අර ඒක තමයි තියෙන්නේ. ඒතර persuasion එකත් එක්ක තමයි හොඳට අර placard එකක් දෙනවනේ අතට ඒක උස්සලා එහෙම ටිකක් දඟලලා ටිකක් chance එක ගන්න ඕනේ. Next we get the moderated caucus. Now here there will moderated caucus actually involves in submission of moderated caucus topics, right? So there are topics for the moderated caucus, and these topics will be I'll explain this separately. Then there is the unmoderated caucus. Moderated එක විරුද්ධ එක unmoderated එක ඊළඟට resolution discussion අපි යමු එකින් එකට වැඩි හොඳයි එහෙම කරොත්. Before that let's talk about points. දැන් මෙතෙන්දී MUN එකදී අපිට හිතන විදිහට කතා කරන්න බෑ. MUN එකේ අපි chair එකක් ඉන්නගෙන ඉස්සරහා ඉන්නවා. දැන් committee එකේ ඉස්සරහා chair ඒ කියන්නේ head table කියලා තියෙනවා. එතන ඉන්නවා vice chairs and chairs. So ඒගොල්ලොන්ගෙන් අපි permission ගන්න ඕන කතා කරන්න. එතකොට අපි කියන්න ඕන අපි placard එකක් දෙනවා. ඒ කියන්නේ card එකක් තමන්ගේ රටේ නම ලියලා තියෙන card එකක් දෙනවා. ඒ card එක ඉස්සුවහම අපි කියන්න ඕනේ මොකක්ද අපේ point එක. අපි raise කරන්නේ කොයි වගේ point එකක්ද කියලා ඉස්සෙල්ලා කියන්න ඕනේ. එතකොට delegate what point do you raise කියලා අහුවහම ඊට පස්සේ කියනවා point of information යවනවා or point of personal privilege, point of parliamentary inquiry වගේ හැම මොකක් හරි කියන්න ඕනේ. So එතකොට මේ points හරි වැදගත්. There are usually 6 points, main points. So let's go one by one. Point of personal privilege. මේක ඉතින් ගොඩක් young අලුතෙන්ම මුලින්ම එන කට්ටිය නිතර පාවිච්චි කරන point එක. මේ ඒගොල්ලෝ වැඩි කතා කරන්නේ නැහැ නේ. ඉතින් ඒගොල්ලෝ වැඩිපුර টয়ලට් එකට යන්න උනහම තමයි point of personal privilege එක කියන්නේ. youngම කට්ටිය. මේ ඉතින් ඒක මේ this one usually involves at any time මේක ඕන වෙලාවක පුළුවන් entertain කරන්න. In committee proceedings, a delegate may raise a point of personal privilege and the chair shall immediately address the point. Now, this is if the point is on personal privilege, the head table is like it's bonded to act to it immediately because it's a personal matter, a personal discomfort or a personal problem of a delegate. So it will be addressed immediately, but it may be refused if the chair deems that this is a disturbance. Okay, so decorum එකක් තියෙනනේ අපේ. ඒ කියන්නේ මේක මේ කරදරයක් නම් මේ 10 15 යන්න ගන්නවා එහෙමත් තියෙනවනේ ඉතින්. එහෙම වුණාම ඉතින් ඊට පස්සේ refuse කරන වෙලාවල් තියෙනවා. And then now the personal privilege will not give you any points. I mean, may points gainවට අපිට දැන් අපි point of information එකක් ගෙනාවත් අපිට ලකුණු 5ක්. අර එහෙම හම්බෙන හොඳ point of information එකක් ගෙනාවත්. ඒ point of personal privilege ගෙනාවට ලකුණු හම්බෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒක ඒවට තමයි assess කරන්නේ. මෙයා කොච්චර point of information ගේනවද? මෙයා කොච්චර point of parliamentary inquiry ගෙනද right to reply ගෙනද එහෙම බලලා තමයි ලකුණු දෙන්නේ. එහෙම තමයි assess කරන්නේ. මේ point of personal privilege වලට ඒක එන්නේ. the point of information එක the point of information will only time delegates will be able to directly pose a question to another delegate. So මෙතන හරියම වැදගත් point of information වලදී අපි දැන් අර speakers list speech එක කරනවානේ. එතකොට මේ අපි අහනවා මේ speakers speech එක ඉවරලා delegate are you open to any questions කියලා. ඒ කියන්නේ අර කරපු delegate ගෙන් අහනවා වාගෙන් ප්‍රශ්න අහුවට කමක් නැහැ. I think usually you should say yes. Because if you are telling
yeah, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, less than 1 minute no.
Okay, fine. එන් කළා පටන් ගමු.
ආ උනේ.
Okay.
එන් කළා පටන් ගමු.